Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Estoril for the second race of the weekend from the Radical European Masters. We had a very enjoyable race yesterday to kick off the season, and that was claimed by Tony Wells and James Littlejohn. Our runners-up, Johan Scheer and Alain Costa, unfortunately had some post-race scrutineering issues, so they have lost their points from yesterday and been struck to the back of the grid, which should give us a very interesting race. Talking you through the action, it is Ben Evans. Alongside me is Will Brown from Radical Sports Cars. And, well, Will, we had a great way to kick off the season yesterday, and today promises to be equally entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Although the weather conditions are perfect here, there's that classic Estoril crosswinds here that I think are really going to make it a challenge as the guys turn through the various turns and twists and turns of this 2.6 mile circuit.
So let's have a look then at the grid, and there is Tom Ashton, who is going to be lining up in pole position. Ashton sharing with Ozzy Youssef. Alongside him on the front row of the grid is race one winner Tony Wells. And the challenge for Tony today, Will, is going to be that after the first race of the year, the success seconds come into play, which is the process by which you balance performance through the year. And so Tony Wells, James Littlejohn already looking at quite a lengthy pit stop. So as last year's race, as yesterday's race winners, they're already carrying an extra 20 seconds of success ballast. So that's going to affect them quite considerably. The second place drivers from yesterday got 15 seconds, third place 10, and then fourth and fifth will get 5 seconds extra on their pit stop time. So that could be very interesting, as we got a thumbs up there from Manhal Alos, Manhal sharing this season with Alex Capadia, and there is Andrea Fausti in the Spider that he is sharing with John Corbett. Now that's a car that had a few adventures along the way yesterday, but I think is a car that could certainly look to challenge for podium. Meanwhile, in the Supersport class, Phil Keane and Peter Belshaw will surely come in to today's opening race as one of the favourites to claim Supersport honours. So we move on down the grid. Ricardo Dona had some car issues, didn't he, yesterday, just when he was on the cusp of scoring a podium, and that left the door open for Maratiotto and Chenchetti to claim the Supersport class. So let's have a look then how they line up in full. So it's going to be Tom Ashton and Tony Wells on the front row of the grid, then Manhal Alos and Jeremy Ferguson next along, Andrea Fausti and Phil Keane on row 3 from Ricardo Dona and Paddy McLuhan, Marcello Maratiotto and Yanni Herpia, then Phil Abbott and Jim Booth. Unfortunately, we have got a non-starter in the form of Jeremy Ferguson, who would appear to have attempted to test the limits of his machinery on the installation lap, as Johan Scheer then lines up at the very back of the grid. So we don't have Jeremy Ferguson there. We do have everybody else. It's a 60-minute race, of course. Rolling start, and the pit window is open for 10 minutes in the middle of the race, between 25 and 35 minutes. But as is ever the way in the Radical European Masters, they must go past the board that says pit lane open before they can actually come in and make that mandatory pit stop. And the pit time is determined by calculating the length of the pit loop. Then we have got a minimum of 45 seconds that they've got to be static in the pits, and then the rest of the pit stop duration is determined by those success seconds that we alluded to a little bit earlier on. And
the other thing just to mention in those pit stop seconds as well, of course, is that the Masters class cars will all have to refuel as well, so they'll be carrying an extra 15 seconds in their stop that brings them up to a base of 60 to account for that extra refueling time.
And what we did see yesterday as a result is that some of the quicker Supersport cars were able to be mixing it in and amongst with some of the Masters class cars. In the Masters class, we have got the Spiders, we've also got the SR8s, and in the Supersport class it is the very attractive looking SR3 RSX. Now starting from the pit lane is Johan Scheer, so he has decided not to chance his arm, starting from the back of the grid, and that's probably a wise move. See how the first corner unfolds and then really push on.
Yeah, it's a 60-minute race is a good opportunity, particularly as well as they won't be carrying those success seconds as you mentioned earlier. So 60 minutes is a long time, and with those mandatory pit stops in the middle, what we've seen so many times throughout the course of the last couple of seasons, of course, is that with the secret nominations for who'll be starting the race with these two driver teams, you'll find that pro drivers are out of position further down the order, battling their way back up to the grid, and that always creates a fantastic spectacle. Now,
just spotting there, it would appear as if Paddy McLuhan is in a different car to yesterday, what was a red Spider has become a black SR8 for McLuhan and James Abbott. That's car number 74. You can just see him at the back of your shot as we follow Manhal Alos.
Yeah, Manhal had a fantastic drive yesterday, didn't he? Really, it did a great job to come within a whisker of the win, but ultimately couldn't quite pull it off as he came under increasing pressure from Shear in the latter stages of the race. But still, a superb drive on his sort of hopefully full season return.
And one of the real challenges for the drivers today is going to be that tyre management. I was talking to Alex Capardia yesterday, and he was saying that Estoril just destroys tyres, particularly the final corner, and therefore, whilst it's essentially 2 sprint races bolted into one, this Radical European Masters race, there is still a degree of tyre management that you've got to undertake.
Esteril's notoriously abrasive, and as you say, it's that final incredibly fast, and the huge aerodynamic loadings that these cars place upon the tyres obviously makes a big difference when it's as abrasive as this. But I guess having not seen the tyre temperatures, but I would imagine that the track temp this morning is a little lower than it was yesterday.
Yeah, although glorious sunshine, it is a little bit breezy as well. Ooh, that was a little bit close there. McLuhan and Maritosso on the cusp of zigging when they should have zagged, but they stay out of trouble as just a chance to get a little bit of heat into that control Dunlop tyre. As we look at Yanni Herpier, one of a handful of the drivers in the race, who is going to do the whole 60 minutes single-handedly, and he had a very good race yesterday en route to second in the Supersport class. Now,
the other car I don't think we should discount at all today, as you were mentioning, the Supersport's been right up on the pace today, and that'll be the SR3 of Phil Keane and Peter Belshaw. Now, they had a DNF, a late retirement, unfortunately, from yesterday's race, but were right on the pace in the early stages, and obviously Keane, fresh from his victory in the GT Open race yesterday, will be looking to make it another one today.
We're about to find out then, because the field are bunching up, ready for the rolling start as they run through the Parabolica. 6 minutes of racing for the second of 3 times this weekend in the Radical European Masters Championship about to get underway. The pace car exits stage right as we wait for the lights to change on the gantry. It's Tom Ashton who paces the field. It's a long run towards the start-finish straight. Now we go live, and it was a very quick anticipation of the lights from Andrea Fausti, the same as well from Marcello Maritiotto, as Wells and Ashton almost running side by side, but it's the yellow car of Tom Ashton who takes the early advantage. Andrea Fausti trying to challenge around the outside. Into second place it's going to be Manhal Alos, who elbows Tony Wells aside. Wells slots into third. Into fourth it's Manny McLuhan. Fifth Andrea Fausti, and up into sixth has come Ricardo Dona. So not such a good start for Phil Keane as he looks to retaliate into turn 3.
Yeah, Fausti took a very wide line there out on the outside, didn't he? And it looked like he was going to be able to take all of those guys into the first corner, but ultimately with the extra weight of the RXC, just caught out slightly into the braking zone.
Still Dona and Keane go side by side, and Phil Keane, once this is being squeezed onto the grass by Ricardo Dona, he now has to get out of it. Oh, is that a problem for Tony Wells? I think he's picked up a bit of damage because the rear of the car, the bodywork, seems to be rubbing against the rear left tyre. We'll see as comes through. Indeed it is. Somebody's given him a little bit of a tap somewhere, and that could potentially be disastrous for the race 1 winner from yesterday. Already Tony Wells dropping off the pace. There you see it. It might be that friction will just rub away the offending pieces of fiberglass, and he won't need to make a trip to the pits.
Yeah, just look, it doesn't appear to be any other damage there, does he? But that's cost him, and already it's given Tom Ashton a chance to break away, and already he's gained a second in the first opening stage of this lap.
Tom Ashton easing clear of Manhal Alos as through the Parabolica. Paddy McLuhan's had a very good start to the race, up into 4th position. And looking to pressurise Tony Wells. Still a little bit of smoke coming from Wells' car. In fact, quite a lot of smoke. Just hope that doesn't rub and cut the tyre, because if so, that could cause him all sorts of bother. Meanwhile, Andrea Fausti getting into the mix as well in 5th. Ricardo Dona continues in the lead of the Supersport class, next along from Phil Keane and Marcello Maritiotto. And the smell of that burning rubber is actually already permeating our commentary box as there's this trail of tyre smoke being left around the circuit.
Yeah, well, once again Keane looks to the inside of Dona, can't quite make it stick there, but looks to get a second bite on this left-hander.
Phil Keen's got to be careful there with track limits. Last time around he was all four wheels off the track, admittedly assisted by Ricardo Dona, but now he's got a good run on Dona, and Doa goes to the inside, then the outside. Lovely move from Phil Keen. Lightning quick reflexes to get the switch back done, and that was absolutely brilliantly executed. He sold him the dummy perfectly and jinked across at the last moment. Phil Keen climbs up into 6th place, moves to the lead of the Supersport class, and is now going to do what he can to pull clear. In the meantime, Johan Scheer is already up into 9th place, having moved past Yanni Herpier and Jim Booth on this last lap. Here we see it again. Covering the inside line down. Then he moves across the outside. He thought he'd boxed Keen in. Phil Keen had different plans.
Yeah, sold a perfect dummy there, as you say, to make the last-minute switch back onto the inside. And Dona's going to be coming under pressure from Maritiotto now, who's right in on the hunt.
Meanwhile, here is our race leader, Tom Ashton, as Ashton flashes through. Goes in to start the 3rd lap of the race. Manhal Alos, 2.3 seconds back. Then Tony Wells is further 2.5 seconds back from there. He's got Paddy McLuhan running along in his tail. Andrea Fausti not really making too much progress from 5th, and already Phil Keen has eased out a 1.2 advantage over Ricardo Dona in just half a lap. And Johan Scheer, in fact it is, who is now past Dona. So here comes Johan Scheer from the back of the grid. The problem is, well, he's already 12.5 seconds back, as we see here the demonstration of the straight line speed of the SR8 versus the SR3s along the start and finish straight.
Yeah, he's able to get an early toe off Maritiotto there that just gave him a slingshot to pass both cars down the main straight, and he made pretty light work of that. But I think now he's got up to the sharp end, it's going to be a lot more difficult for him to pass Keen. He's a real hard charging racer.
Except, of course, that it's not really Phil Keen's fight to have necessarily, but as you say, Phil Keen is
well, this is one of the tracks that really seems to equalise the SR3s and the more powerful SR8s and Spiders because of its tight and twisty, and there's lots of sort of medium speed corners that really play to the strength of the SR3's balance. So I would be surprised if a few of the front-running SR3s maybe chance their arm this weekend and go toe-to-toe with these SR8s.
That will be the aspiration for Phil Keen. Meanwhile, we're watching the fight for 3rd place as Paddy McLuhan closing up onto terms with Tony Wells, and as we had hoped might be the case, the piece of bodywork just seems to have in fact righted itself and slipped back into position. Meanwhile, here is a replay of Yanni Herpier and Jim Booth, and that is Herpier sliding to the inside of Booth.
Yeah, it looks like Booth's just run wide slightly there with the USA Cup racer, just getting used to these European circuits. But he's loving the weekend, and he can't wait to compete some more of the European circuits this year.
It's good to see that you're putting into Donald Trump terms of global geography for any of our spectators watching back in the United States. Thank you very much for joining us on this Sunday morning as Tom Ashton leads the way from Manhal Alos. Then this fight for 3rd between Wells and McLuhan. Paddy McLuhan settling into the toe behind Tony Wells. Behind, Johan Scheer has already cleared Phil Keen and is now getting onto terms with Andrea Fausti. Now this is when it starts to get a little bit more difficult, because with the long start and finish straight, although the lap time is relatively equalised, Scheer has got the opportunity to pass there, but Fausti makes a slight mistake coming through turn 6. They head downhill towards turn 7, and Scheer decides not to force the issue to the inside line. We're only 7 or so minutes into this race. You can see that Fausti's moving around all over the track in the Spider, and Johan Scheer jinks to the inside at the chicane. Just saw the gap opening up for him, and that is 5th place then for Johan Scheer.
Yeah, again, Fausti just grabbing a break there for a second, and that just gave Scheer the breathing space he needed to put that slightly smaller SR8 through. And now Keen really challenging there. Look at the toe he's getting off that RXC Spider.
They come out of the final turn. Here is another look at it. And this is the first time that we've been to Estoril with the Spider in the Radical European Masters. I just wonder if the teams are a little bit lost with the setup with it, because the drivers seem to be struggling a little bit with turning, and it's just maybe that they need to recalibrate the braking points a little bit, rather than trying to match where some of the SR3s are braking, which is obviously a little bit later.
Well, and you have to remember as well, these are the new RXC Spider turbos. So this is although we trialled this this car in testing a few times at Barcelona and Monza last year. Effectively, this is a new car to the team, so it's their first event out, and they're just getting a feel for really where the setup's at and what the car's potential of doing. But it's a lot more powerful than both the RXC Spider V8 and of course the SR8 RX were. Using the same 3.5 litre EcoBoost turbocharged power plant as the RXC GT3 car, bait in de-restricted form. So this is a supremely fast car, but it's going to take a little bit of time just for them to get used to that slightly heavier power plant and ultimately platform.
Can't wait to see them in action at Spa though, because that will really play into their hands. And we saw last year the Spiders without the turbo were pretty impressive in a straight line at Spa. Well, what that means with an eye towards the championship is that the likes of Tony Wells and Jed Littlejohn know that this is a weekend where they need to get as many points as possible. Tony Wells busy fending off Paddy McLuhan, and they have got Johan Scheer looking to come in and join the party as well. Tom Ashton remains our race leader, 5.1 seconds his advantage over Manhal Alos. Then we've got Tony Wells in third. Now Johan Scheer, with all of that overtaking, has actually gained on our race leader Tom Ashton, and that last lap for Scheer was 1.9 seconds quicker than Ashton, but now he's immediately getting into the turbulent air behind Paddy McLuhan, and this is when the task becomes a little bit trickier.
Yes, and now there's just over 11 seconds between him and the leader Ashton. As you say, this whole leading group now just seems to be starting to bunch up as ultimately Shear's sort of hoovering up everybody behind him and forcing these guys to get a move on. So it's going to be interesting as we approach the pit stops just to see who can ultimately. I think it's going to boil down to who can get fresh air and some track position. But now Shear's really starting to put the pressure on McLuhan, and just decides that he'll use a bit of discretion there and follow them through this complex.
And this is also where the teams have got to start thinking about, well, how hard do you really want to push? Because I expect they'll all have a target lap time in mind that they'd be wanting to run to in order to make sure that the tyres are going to be usable in the final quarter of the race. And therefore, the last thing you want is to be really hurried along by Johan Scheer. Paddy McLuhan took a big bite of curb, then it unsettled the car, kicked it sideways. Scheer wasn't quite able to take advantage. He now looks to draw alongside McLuhan into turn 11. He'll be to the outside at turn 12. Nothing doing there. On towards the Parabolica. Again, Johan Scheer not quite close enough to challenge. Instead, he's going to try and force Paddy McLuhan offline, and that's exactly what happens. Is that going to give Scheer the run now onto the start and finish straight? McLuhan moves across to defend. Oh, and he squeezes Johan Scheer. That was a little bit robust from Paddy McLuhan. Johan Scheer then looks to the other side. McLuhan holds that inside line towards turn 1. Scheer to the outside then will duck across for the switchback. He certainly knows McLuhan's not going to make it easy for him.
Yeah, absolutely, and once again really having to defend hard there. Caught offline, he's being forced left, right and centre offline by Scheer, but can he make it stick this time? Yes, he can, on the uphill. Yeah,
he manages to pick up the momentum coming out of turn 3. Swings a little bit sideways, but Scheer is through into 4th place. He's done what he needs to do. He's found a way past Paddy McLuhan, having only sat behind him really for half a lap or so. This battle, for reference, is taking place about 11 seconds behind our race leader Tom Ashton. So as we are just over 10 minutes in, Tom Ashton, our leader from Manhal Alos, then Tony Wells, the man we're watching, Johan Scheer is 4th, Paddy McLuhan is 5th, Andrea Fausti is 6th, Phil Keane leads the Supersport class in 7th from Ricardo Dona, Marcello Maracchiotto, Yanni Herpia, Jim Booth and Phil Abbott.
Now, what you would say is all the while Scheer's been battling through this, the person that's really benefiting is Manhal Alos, because of course he'll be handing over to the supremely quick Alex Capadia in the second half of the race, and as we saw yesterday, he's one of the fastest drivers here all weekend. So this is working out perfectly as Scheer makes fairly light work there of being able to squeeze past and take a place on Wells.
Yeah, that struck me as Tony not wanting to force this at all. Instead, actually a lap or two of following Johan Scheer might give him a little bit of daylight over Paddy McLuhan. So they accelerate down the start and finish straight. There is Manhal, who have moved right across towards the pit wall then. I just wondered if he wanted to signal something, and has then had a huge lock-up into turn 1. As the tyre smoke tells us, has Manhal emerged in one piece? Yes, he has. That's the good news. He's 4.6 seconds clear of Johan Scheer, but now that Scheer is into some clear air, how quickly can he set about reeling in? Manhal is running wide in the background. Paddy McLuhan gives you an indication just how hard these guys are pushing. front of turn 4. We're on the 8th lap of the race. In the Supersport class, not unsurprisingly, Phil Keen's been able to build an 8.5 second advantage over Ricardo Donut at the front of the Supersport class.
Yeah, indeed, he's just still trailing Fausti. He hasn't been quite able to find a place past, but still within a second of him. So, yeah, again, that could be one to watch in the latter stage of the race as Fausti hands over to Corbett and of course Keane over to former champion Belshaw as well.
Some very, very strong driver pairings in the Radical European Masters Championship this year. I expect this is going to be one of those title fights that's going to go all the way to the line. I just wonder if we somewhat jinx Manhalos. Having said that everything is playing into his hands, we have now seen the aftermath of 2 lockups over the course of this lap, and that has meant that Johan Scheer is already something like 2.5 seconds quicker than Manhal just through the first couple of sectors. It's the fight for 4th, swings out to the Parabolica. Here is Johan Scheer. He's already onto terms with Manhalalos as they head towards turn 1. Manhal's got to be a bit smoother on the brakes, which he is on this occasion. They sprint out of first corner downhill towards turn 2. And all the while, of course, Johan Scheer is closing up onto the race leader, Tom Ashton, as Alos runs a little bit wide through turn 3. Johan Scheer's not going to need a second invitation. Alos, though, gathers it up as they climb uphill towards turn 4. Again, Alos slithers out wide, and Scheer able to slide through. Meanwhile, here is Phil Keane, who found a way. Oh, and contact between Phil Keane. Oh, dear me. And that's a big accident with Phil Keane and Andrea Fausti. And Keane has absolutely slammed into the tyre wall at the start of the pit straight. And Andrea Fausti crunches into the pit wall as well. And that is a very, very nasty accident. As we have another look at it. And we will almost certainly see the safety car, if not more. Well, the good news is that Phil Keane is uninjured and getting out of the car.
Yeah, sure enough, there's the safety car scrambled for that. But yeah, great to see Keane out the car, and hopefully shortly Fausti we'll see as well.
And well, we are, I suspect, looking at a fairly lengthy safety car period here as well. We're 10 minutes away from the pit lane opening, and that was a very, very nasty incident. And there is a car of, well, Phil Keane, we can definitely see is out of the car. Can't see that Andrea Fausti is in the cockpit either, which is good news. And what they're going to do is take them through the pit lane. And we rather feared that this may have happened because Phil Keane had found a way past Fausti through the technical section, and then they just misjudged the moment to pull out as Johan Scheer has actually missed the pit lane entry, and he's going to have to try and pick his way through the debris, and that isn't going to be the easiest for Johan Scheer. We're going to look as well as the camera pans across at the car of Andrea Fausti, and that is, well, I'm glad to see the car's empty, so Andrea Fausti's got out of the car as well under his own steam. Here's another look at it at full speed. So Keane just defended. Fausti misjudged the move. There was contact, and then just the ricochet effect, and thumping into the tyre wall, and Fausti straight into the Armco barrier, which buckles under the impact before cannoning across the road into the concrete wall on the other side. Yeah,
it was that unfortunate second impact, as you saw the initial bounce, and then as Keane's tried to counter steer to hold the car in a straight line, then that secondary impact obviously is what ultimately is causing both just to be passengers. So a real shame to see them both eliminated from the race.
The most important thing, though, is that both of them would seem to be okay. We saw Phil Keane getting out of the car, and he went into the wall sideways, and Andrea Fausti as well out of the cockpit. So that is good, and it really shows, Will, that how strong and how good the safety standards are with these Radical cars, because that was a very high speed, very, very nasty accident, and both drivers more or less okay, I'm sure, quite shaken up.
Yeah, of course, this is with it being a full enclosed sports prototype, of course you have a lot of side pod protection. The cars are immensely strong anyway. All these are FIA crash tested cars. They're immensely well tested, both for rollover protection, the front and rear impact and what have you. But with having those big wide side pods to the side with the radiators, and then there's a lot of extraneous sort of equipment to knock off, so that does provide a high level of protection and just an extra absorption in an impact.
This is going to take a little bit of time to sort out, isn't it, with Johan Scheer having essentially gained a lap it with a Seaman on the rest of the field, or is that... No, it's not. That's Phil Abbott. So Johan Scheer has rather lost contact with the safety car, so it's going to take a few moments for them to get into line. The race order was Tom Ashton, prior to safety car, was leading it from Johan Scheer. Then it was Manhal Alos, Tony Wells, Paddy McLuhan, Ricardo Donat, and then Yanni Herpier, Marcello Maritiotto, Jim Booth and Phil Abbott.
Yes, now the pit stop window was due to open in just over 6 minutes, and I think we can see the clean-up operation taking place into that. So it's this is perfect, really. This is exactly what the likes of Alos and Wells probably will have wanted, really. Particularly
as the pit handicap will essentially be neutralised as well. Yes, they'll lose a little bit of track position, but they won't lose any time. So what I can anticipate that we're going to see is when the pit window opens in 6 minutes, we'll then have that further lap around the track, and then we'll see them all coming in probably to pit in as early as possible within the pit window. Of course, the pit window itself is going to feel really quite slow here, because the lap behind the safety car is going to take the best part of 5 minutes. They're only going to have 2 or 3 laps anyway within which to make their pit stop. Safety car coming out in the sunshine here of the Radical European Masters as we hit 1/3 race distance. If you have just joined us, well, we were enjoying an excellent race with Johan Scheer having started from the back of the pits, started from the pit lane rather, working himself up into 2nd place. But then we had contact between Andrea Fausti and Phil Keane as they came onto the start and finish straight, and both cars cannoning into the tyre wall 9k on the outside the circuit, and then Fausti bouncing across the track to have another heavy contact with the pit wall. Both drivers are out of the car, but the pit straight itself is, to all intents and purposes, currently blocked. So they're behind the safety car, and they're working their way through the pit lane at the end of each lap behind the safety car. It's always a shame to see the safety car coming out, particularly just as the race was coming to the boil. But this is one of the nice things, Will, about having a triple header race weekend as well, because it means that if the cards don't quite fall in the favour of the drivers this time around, they'll have another chance later on this afternoon.
Yes, 3 chances to score points, and the points have been slightly revised as well for 2016 in the Radical European Masters. So whereas previously it was started with a maximum point score of 40 points, it now starts from 80. So rather than sort of going down through all the way down to rather than starting at 20 and going down to 1, it starts at 40. So there's many more opportunities as you go further down the field to challenge for points and to pick up additional points, rather than just scoring a single point for finishing. So it gives us a greater opportunity for the guys further down the order. Even if you've had a bad stint or a bad pit stop, you can still challenge to pick up additional points.
And it's not unknown for drivers to win championships without winning a race. It has happened, and if you've got a relatively flat point structure, then that is certainly possible. As the field roll down through the pit lane, quite where Johan Scheer is in all of this, we will unpick in due course. I would suggest it's probably picking his way through the debris on the start-finish straight there has dropped him some way back in the order, and does that look like? Doesn't appear to be in that train. I think he's out on the other side. He's in the pits according to our timing screen. So that will take a little bit of sorting out, but I'm sure that is not going to be too tricky to do. So we have got the safety car out. While we've got that slight pause, just a reminder that we've got the 3rd race of the afternoon. It starts at 3:40 local time. Here is another look at the incident. Just glancing contact, no malice involved. But then huge impacts for both drivers, and absolutely nothing that Fausti could do.
So you can't really imagine what Fausti could feel then as a passenger, realising his trajectory and really nothing he could do about it.
Well, I can probably guess that he was feeling he'd rather be somewhere else at that particular moment. But again, seeing that replay just shows that the safety cells did exactly what they need to do, that the bits of the car that were supposed to fall off did fall off, the bits that were supposed to remain absolutely intact remained absolutely intact. I was about to say that, yes, we're back at 3:30 this afternoon. Our coverage starts for the third and final race of the weekend, and then the next time that we're going to be action from the Radical European Masters is the end of May, 21st, 22nd of May.
Yes, at Spa-Francorchamps, which of course is ever always a popular circuit with Radical racers, and we saw great grid of cars there this year and last year, and I'm sure it'll be the same again this year. Slightly earlier race meeting this year. Rather than September, we've moved back to our traditional May date, and yeah, it should be fantastic. And I really hope that Fausti and Corby can get that RXC Spider repaired in time for that meeting, because it's a circuit that's sure to benefit the 600 horsepower RXC Spiders.
And this is one of the beauties of the Radical European Masters. You do get to race at some of Europe's absolutely finest circuits, and again it shows just how nicely the Radical Racing ladder starts, because you can come into Radical Racing through the SL1 Cup. You learn what it's like to be a racing driver. You basically get handheld all the way, getting your own car, getting your equipment, learning to race the car, learning to prepare the car, and then you step up racing national championships in the UK, and then can progress on to international motorsport.
Yeah, there's a very comprehensive ladder of racing all the way, as you say, from the track day rookies who first enter the SL1 Cup with no real previous racing experience, and they're given all the tuition that they need, all the help and advice and guidance to really get comfortable and to lap safely and confidently in their SL1 Cup race cars, which you shouldn't be fooled, despite the fact that the car's only 185 horsepower and some in the region of 460 kilograms. It's still a supremely quick car. Anybody that knows lap times around brands will know that anything under 50 seconds is pretty quick. So that's where they start from, and then moving from that, then either with the SR1 or with an SR3 into the Radical Challenge Championship that it now is in the UK, which is a great mix of enduro and sprint races in the same weekend. And as we saw at the first round there at Snetterton last couple of weekends ago, a capacity grid there, and then of course moving up into the Radical European Masters, so either with the SR3 again or one of these RXC Spiders or an SR8. And the other nice thing as well to see is like Jan Booth there, who you can just see with the McDonald's logo on the back of his wing, is guys coming over from other domestic championships around the world. So he's an erstwhile competitor in the Radical USA Cup and has really taken like a duck to water here.
Well, let's just pick up in the SL1 Cup for a moment, because I'm sure there's a few people watching who are thinking about, do I go into the SL1 Cup? And as a racing driver, particularly as you're coming into motor racing, sometimes you just want to go as quickly as possible. And the fact you've got the SL1 Cup car, which because of its pace around Brands Hatch, as you alluded to, Will, it brings you in at a certain level as a rookie, whereas if you start in something else which is a bit slower, you then still have that intermediate step into something else that the SR1 Cup almost bypasses, and you can progress then quite easily into the SR3.
And a lot of the controls and the method of driving the car is the same, regardless of whether it's an RXC Spider, a GT3 car, or the SR1. Ultimately, it's all about being smooth. Smoothness is key, and it's about not hustling the car and really letting the car do the work. So the SR1s run on a treaded tyre, they run on a treaded racing tyre, so this gets up to temperature very quickly, and there's no need to have slicks and wets, but it does mean the car moves around a little bit more maybe than the SR3, and that means the drivers have really got to think about how they control the car and that delicate balance of control. And the other thing as well is that with that SL1 Cup package, there's track days on the lead into driving the car. So rather than just getting straight into competition and making errors and mistakes that potentially could be very costly, at least they're doing it in a non-competitive environment in the track days or the early days. And we've got some great instructors, people like Tom Ashton, who you can see there at the front of the grid, is one of our SL1 Cup instructors. But then we've got other people like Andy Wallace, of course, 88 Jaguar Le Mans winner, some really great names and guys with a wealth of experience, not only in radicals but elsewhere in competition as well.
Well, the pit window is open, and the safety car, I'm pleased to say, is going to be coming in at the end of this lap. So the circuit staff here in Estoril doing a magnificent job in recovering that incident within about 12 minutes, which really took some doing. Now, here comes Johan Scheer, who, through all of this, has actually gained a lap. So what I expect is going to happen is that the lap he's gained will be deducted from him, and he's slotting into the second place where he was previously. So that's astute driving from Scheer, and all that needs to be done is just to remove that additional lap that he's gained. Now, with about 8 minutes here before the pit window closes, it is going to give Scheer, it's going to give Tom Ashton the opportunity to at least get some more laps under their belt before they need to come in and make their pit stop.
Yeah, so really it's crucial for Tom Ashton to get a good start here, and he's going to have to defend pretty vigorously from Scheer, who really has been on a charge and been the fastest driver all weekend. But you can see them now bunching up again for the restart. Here we go.
So it's the yellow car of Tom Ashton who is going to be pacing the field as they head through turn 12. Now, Johan Scheer, as we say, has gone and done an additional lap here. I'm sure that will be deducted in due course. He is second in the queue, which is where he was in the queue prior to the safety car. As we go racing once more, and immediately ducking into the pit lane, we have got several of them. In goes Manhal Alos, in goes Tony Wells.
Yeah, an early break there from Ashton to get the power down as early as he possibly could, but it doesn't look like it's phased Scheer at all, and already he's right up on his tail.
So into the pit lane we have got Alos, we've got Tony Wells, we've got Ricardo Doni, we've got Marcello Maratiotto, we've got Phil Abbott. As to a halt comes Manhal Alos. I think he's slightly missed his marks there. In goes the fuel. And then several seconds later, in will go Alex Capardia. That's quite a thirsty fuel stop, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be dropping down quite as quick as they'd hoped either, I think, there.
Meanwhile, Johan Scheer immediately onto terms with Tom Ashton. This is the fight for the lead of the race, as Ashton busy defending from Scheer as they swing through turn 6 downhill. They've got 5 minutes before the pit window closes. And Paddy McGluen also staying out. He's there in 3rd place.
Yeah, and he, of course, will be handing over to Radical Works driver James Abbott. So, there's 3 drivers that will be chomping at the bit here, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ozzy Youssef, who of course will be taking over from Ashton, will be maybe thinking that this might be his opportunity for a first overall European Masters win. Yeah,
Ozzy is a very handy driver in his own right, and has got a lot of experience in a variety of different machinery. So this could be quite nice for them, because they won't be encumbered with success seconds in the pits in quite the way that others will be. Got a little bit that they're carrying, 5 seconds, but not a huge amount, as down the start and finish straight Tom Ashton just eases towards the middle of the road. He's going to make this as difficult as possible for Johan Scheer, and why not? They're fighting for the lead of the race. Down towards turn 2, Scheer tries to find a way to the inside, and Johan Scheer just seems to be so confident in the grip levels of that car, and he's able to place it where others are struggling.
Yeah, he can really put it pretty much wherever he wants. As we saw yesterday, he could find gaps on the inside of apexes that nobody else could. So that car's obviously set up exactly as they want it, and a huge level of front end grip that they can really place, and that's what you want, because then what you find then is your tyres will last longer, because you can you're not having to really hustle the car. It's not sliding around. You can just use minimal steering input and not overstress those tyres.
Now there is Alex Capardia in the white 61 car. He has just emerged from his pit stop and has managed to get himself on track in front of Paddy McGluen. The pit window open for another 3.5 minutes. Red car you can see in the background is Marco Cencetti, who took over from Marcello Maratiotto. So this lengthy safety car period has given a very different complexion to the way that the race is going to be unfolding, as fight for the lead remains absolutely conjoined. Capardia ahead of McGluen, not really easing away from Paddy McGluen just yet, as he gets himself up to speed, finds where the grip levels are, finds what the car is doing. Now is McGluen going to duck towards the pits this time around? Meanwhile, in comes Johan Scheer, so clearly he feels that he was being held up a little bit by Tom Ashton, but he couldn't find a way past. Also in is Paddy McGluen, that's to hand over to James Abbott. It's Alain Costa who will be taking over from Johan Scheer. So now Kapadia is essentially racing cars that are static in the pit lane, and not surprisingly Kapadia has emerged some way clear of James Littlejohn, 7 seconds, reflecting the fact that Littlejohn needed that longer pit stop with the success seconds from yesterday's win.
So it's good release there from Shear to jump out the car, and just again, as we said, all the Masters class cars have to do a mandatory refuel, so there's an extra 15 seconds invoked in their pit stop. But we'll see in a second as we wait to see Costa belted in the car and just what effect this is going to have.
Around turn 6, Alex Kapadia in pursuit of Tom Ashton, but also trying to pick away past Jim Booth. Jim not yet having made his mandatory pit stop, as Ashton climbs uphill. He is able to squeeze another lap out of this if he really wants to. I suspect he will, because as you say, Will, when this is all shaken out, he and Ozzy Yusuf are very well poised. But no, into the pit lane now comes Tom Ashton to hand over to Ozzy Yusuf. Our timing screen, the results that you're seeing are a little bit jumbled. As I say, it's because Johan Shear went along the start and finished straight under the safety car when the rest went through the pit lane, and essentially he gained a lap on the rest of the field, which hasn't yet been pegged back from him.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, there's slightly disjointed pit loops there for the timing screen, caused by that blockage on the start-finish straight. But yeah, again, another quick jump out there from and it's great to see Tom back in an SR8. It's a few years since we last saw him racing an SR8 in the UK with Gary Kane, and previous to that the SR3 and PR6 even before that. So yeah, I'm sure he's been revelling in the performance of that car this weekend.
Alex Kapadia racing that static car of Ozzy Yusuf in the pit lane, but Kapadia is, when this is all worked through, going to be best part of probably 20 or 30 seconds behind Yusuf, and that's going to be a big ask to chase down the other driver who may well benefit from this, Will, is James Abbott, because the car that's taken over from Paddy McLuhan is going to be within chasing distance of Ozzy Yusuf, you'd suggest, particularly as James and Paddy with a retirement yesterday, they haven't got any success seconds, so actually a 5 second shorter pit stop than that of Ashton and Yusuf. This is always the joy, of course, of these mini Enduros. The pit window has closed.
Just scanning down the list to check it. Yeah, it appears that everybody, I'm just making sure that everybody has actually pitted and hasn't missed their opportunity there. It does look like everyone's made it through and hasn't mistimed it, but yeah, so now we just wait for a lap and see. As there, sure enough, there's
Ozzy Yusuf
emerging,
and there's James Abbott.
That's right. Here comes Abbott, and indeed not far behind Kapadia either.
So James Abbott it is who has essentially taken the lead of the race, with then into second place Ozzy Yusuf. Third looks like it's going to be Alex Kapadia. In and amongst that, though, there are some super sport cars. Ricardo Dona seems to be right in the middle of the mix too, and that is on
There's
merit.
Colin Noble there as well. He's also doing a great job as Noble fighting his way past Yusuf there.
And that's a change of position for Colin Noble to the inside of Ozzy Yusuf, and that, I believe, on adjusted timings, he's going to put him into 4th place. Of course, he doesn't hold it for very long because, or does he? He looks to dispute it to the inside line on the brakes into turn 6. Well done, Colin Noble. And now he's got half a lap to try and buy himself enough ground over Ozzy Yusuf so that Yusuf can't power past along the start and finish straight.
Yeah, you do feel there was a briefest hesitations of Yusuf there, whether he considered if he had enough power, extra power in the SR8 to make it past, and that was enough for Noble to say, no, I'll hold on to that, thank you.
Through the uphill chicane, and all the while Alex Kapadia closing up onto terms with Ozzy Yusuf, and it's probably Ashton and Yusuf who have really lost out as a result of the lengthy safety car, because they were nicely poised to inherit quite a big lead with the pace of Ashton. As it is, Kapadia immediately onto terms with Ozzy Yusuf, and I suspect he's going to find a way past here, and he does as they come on to the start and finish straight. Kapadia draws alongside and powers past Ozzy Yusuf. That gains the place for Alex Kapadia, puts him up into 3rd or 4th position. depending on what happens with Alain Costa and where he is in terms of track position, believe that Costa is actually running behind Alex Kapadia, but at the moment he's still got that additional lap to his credit.
Now onto that Super Sports lap battle, you'd say that Colin Noble's got a good chance of stealing it from Ricciardo here. He's currently lapping some 2 seconds a lap faster than that SR3 that's currently leading the class. With a good 22 minutes to go, this is looking good for a strong finish actually for that SR3 pairing of him and Abbott.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it? In fact, that Colin Noble might get onto the overall race podium with Phil Abbott.
Just look up again. Yeah, you can see already that Kapadia is climbing onto the back of Noble, so this should be fairly short work for him.
The challenge for Kapadia, though, is that he has got 8 or so seconds to chase down on James Abbott. That's really the battle to watch for, that's likely to determine the outcome of this race when all is said and done and sorted out a little bit later on. If you have just joined us as we approach 2/3 race distance, we had a lengthy safety car following a very nasty accident between Phil Keane and Andrea Fausti. Both drivers got out of the cars, which were pretty heavily damaged. The safety car was taking the field through the pit lane, but Johan Scheer missed that signal, went along the start and finish straight, and essentially gained himself and Alain Costa a lap, which has now been credited removed. So now we've got the appropriate order. So there you have it on your screen. James Abbott leads from Ricciardo Dona. Alex Kapadia is now third as he moves past Colin Noble along the start and finish straight. And then we have got Ozzy Youssef in fifth, Alain Costa in sixth, Yanni Herpia in seventh, James Littlejohn is eighth ahead of Marco Cenchetti and Jim Booth. We've got the stop and go penalty, which I think is what you're alluding to, Will, for Ozzy Youssef. Interesting.
That obviously is going to give Costa an opportunity to regain a place as well, but yeah, real shame for them.
It's also good news.
I wonder what that was, what that could have been, possibly maybe speeding in the pit lane, but I'm sure we'll find out after the race.
It's good news as well for James Littlejohn. Now this is fascinating because the top 8 cars are only covered by 16 seconds. We have got 3 pro drivers out in the Masters class, James Abbott, Alex Kapadia and James Littlejohn. Here is our race leader, James Abbott, hopping across the curb. Now that looks very much like Paddy McGluen to me.
Yes, I'm just wondering if he's maybe doing the whole race on his own.
Certainly looks like Paddy McGluen's helmet, doesn't it? Now I just wonder whether or not James has decided to keep his powder dry for the GT Open race a little bit later on, given the event slightly earlier in the race. Certainly, although the timing screen tells us James Abbott's in the car, the helmet tells us that that's Paddy McGluen. So we'll go with McGluen, and yes, indeed, that does get corrected now. So McGluen goes the full race single-handedly, and he has got Alex Kapadia chasing him down. Here comes Kapadia. This is a move for second position, and goes in favour of Kapadia. Now, what about the progress of James Littlejohn? He is up into 6th as Ozzy Youssef goes in for a stop-and-go penalty. Could Littlejohn get 3rd place overall here, or will we see a Supersport class car, either Ricciardo Dona or Colin Noble, on the outright race rostrum?
Yeah, just under 20 minutes to go now, so yeah, as you say, it's climbing up now. Littlejohn just 17 seconds adrift from McLuhan, but he's currently lapping, well, very similar time actually. In fact, McLuhan on that last lap was 7/10 faster.
Yeah, Paddy McGluen is absolutely flying, isn't he? Now that he's out of the traffic and he's able to run at his own pace, he's consistently circulating the low 1 minute 41 second bracket, which is very similar to the pace being run by both James Littlejohn and Alex Kapadia, who have had traffic to contend with. Now the exam question for Alex Kapadia is 8 seconds in 18 minutes, and that feels like a reasonably robust ask of Kapadia.
Particularly with just 0.03 of a second between them and the last lap, so he's going to have to pick his pace up if he's going to make any inroads.
Yeah, that's going to take a while, isn't it, a 0.03 of a second a lap. Here, meanwhile, is Colin Noble. He's chasing down Ricciardo Dona. That is for the lead of the Supersport class, and also 3rd place in the race overall. It's Dona and Noble. Those SR3s look such good fun through the Parabolica. They just turn in and the car gives them all the grip that they need. Noble closing up in the slipstream behind Ricardo Dona. Is he going to be close enough to challenge? Meanwhile, at the back of your shot, you can see Yanni Herp having a big moment, but also James Littlejohn now chasing Alain Costa in the battle for 5th and 6th place.
A little bit of a wiggle on the brakes there for Costa, and that's given Littlejohn a chance to close him up on the braking zone.
Meanwhile, Alex Capaldi was only in clear air 0.2 of a second quicker than Paddy McLuhan last time. So this is coming together very nicely for McLuhan as Littlejohn forces Costa into a little bit of a slide. I think it's better at trying to gamble and roll the dice to the inside at turn 4. Because of course, if these two don't slow themselves down too much, they do have the potential prize of 3rd in the race overall to look for. Because the battling Supersport cars are only a few metres ahead up the road. Swing around turn 6. Here are the battling Supersport class leaders, Dona and Noble, and then at the back of the picture, Costa and Littlejohn. Don't know where to look. These are the fights for 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th. The problem here for Littlejohn is going to be, where does he make that move? He thinks maybe for a lunge into the chicane, but Alain Costa covers it.
Yeah, well covered on the second part as well there, really to hold the line tight, but perhaps leaving the door open this time for Littlejohn to get round on the inside. And no, once again squeeze, and Costa shut the door once more.
That's great defensive driving, isn't it, from Alain Costa? He is determined not to make life easy at all for James Littlejohn, but Littlejohn will now fancy his chances along the start and finish straight with a little bit of toe to benefit him. The same also goes for Colin Noble in pursuit of Ricardo Dona. Noble leaves it late, he ducks out to the bubble, looks to the inside line, tries to force the move, nothing doing. Littlejohn does the same with exactly identical results, no way through.
Yeah, and I think that move by Littlejohn there might have just cost him a second, but in the background we saw him jink. Will he here? No, once again, still behind Costa.
And the challenge, particularly for Colin Noble in 3rd place, is that the braking distance for the SR3 you measure in millimetres.
Oh, slide by Costa, mistake there as he went out right wide onto the marbles, and that's given Littlejohn a very easy chance, and oh, that's disastrous for Costa.
Certainly is. He recovers. He also loses ground to Marco Cencetti, and now Littlejohn has got 3rd place in his sights. I was about to say the braking distance for these SR3 RSXs is so short that Colin Noble is really struggling, even though you can see how much quicker than Ricardo Dona is, that if Dona just has the car correctly placed around the track, there's very few opportunities for Colin Noble to go through without having to try something extremely bold.
Yeah, and all the while this is playing into the hands of Littlejohn, of course, who's closing up. You can see how quickly he's been able to close up with that extra power, and as these pairs gobble in, these so identically matched, it just shows how closely matched these cars are in specification and performance as well.
All the while at the front of the field, Paddy McLuhan leads and is only giving away 0.2 of a second to Alex Capaldi rather. Here is a replay of Alain Costa's moment.
Yeah, you see Costa runs right wide out onto the debris on the outside of the corner there where you shouldn't be, and yeah, sure enough, caught out by the conditions.
And then possibly a little bit of a lead-lined right foot as he tried to accelerate up the hill, and he just didn't quite have the grip underneath him, as now Colin Noble's got the run on Ricardo Dona, who's going to be sandwiched here as James Littlejohn jumps both of them to take 3rd place in the race. Colin Noble eases past Ricardo Dona. He stays in 4th, but he now takes the lead of the Supersport class. And Ricardo Dona slips down into 5th position. For Littlejohn, however, though, is now 10 seconds adrift of Alex Capaldi. Capaldi making very limited progress on Paddy McLuhan at the front of the field. Here's another look at it then.
Yeah, so you saw Noble lining up for the overtake around to the right of Dona, but all the while, look at the speed difference there. And able to slingshot past the pair of them.
Now, what has James Littlejohn got now in his back pocket? Is he going to be able to do anything about the race leaders? With 30 minutes remaining, he needs to be a good second and a half a lap quicker than both McLuhan and Capaldi, and that is feeling like it's going to be unlikely. In the Supersport class, well, this isn't done and dusted just yet, because Marco Cencetti isn't too far adrift of Colin Noble and Ricardo Dona. It's only some 6 seconds back, Cencetti, and given the extent to which Noble and Dona have been busy battling, then Cencetti's been closing up onto their tail to the tune of 3 seconds a lap for the past couple of tours of the circuit.
Yeah, although as we've seen for the last couple of laps, Dona's a pretty hard guy to overtake, even if you can catch up to the back of him. He seems pretty good at defending his line and holding the car tight to the inside of the apexes, and that's not going to make things easy for Ciancetti when he does make progress.
Now, Paddy McLuhan last time around did a 1 minute 41.1, whereas Alex Kapadia a 1 minute 40.5, and Kapadia has now really put the hammer down and is seeing if he can chase down the 7.5 seconds that he needs in the next 12 minutes. Ciancetti, meanwhile, was 3 seconds quicker again last time around than Riccardo Dona. There's Dona, here comes Ciancetti, and again the safety car has really played into he and Marcello Maracciotto's hands. Yeah,
it's actually led to a pretty fascinating finale, really, hasn't it, as these guys have all sort of got bunched up, and it's not helped Little John the best, as you say, because McLuhan, of course, has been able to keep the pace up so consistently at the front end of the field, but only now it really seems that Kapadia is going to be able to make any inroads.
Fascinating as we head into the final 11 or so minutes. The penultimate race of the weekend. Kapadia is on course for an absolutely phenomenal lap here. Phil Keane, oh no, it is Johan Scheer who's got the fast lap of the race to his credit. That was set much earlier on in proceedings, so we've still got these chases underway. Ciancetti on Riccardo Dona, which is the one that we're watching, Kapadia on McLuhan, and McLuhan maybe starting to get a little bit flustered because Kapadia was 1.8 seconds quicker than the race leader McLuhan last time around. Oh wow, and that a 1 minute 41.8 for McLuhan suggests that he had a couple of wayward moments somewhere. A 1 minute 40.096 for Kapadia, that car's quickest lap of the race as well.
Yeah, pretty quickly recovered by McLuhan in the first sector though, so he's on this lap he's identically matched Kapadia, so as you say, possibly a mistake on that previous lap that's cost him just a few seconds.
Yeah, it feels like that was a mistake-ridden lap rather than one that necessarily completely got away from him, and it could be something as minor as a slight wobble coming on the start and finish straight sets you up badly for a lap anyway. Meanwhile, Ciancetti inexorably closing up onto the tail of Riccardo Dona. Dona continuing to give away the best part of 2 seconds a lap. Therefore, the red car of Ciancetti rapidly reeling him in. This is the fight for 5th place, second in the Supersport class. This, meanwhile, at the front of it has been a better lap for Paddy McLuhan, we can tell you. He has only conceded 0.4 of a second to Alex Kapadia, and that is perfectly acceptable for him. Kapadia really needs to be a second a lap quicker to be in a position to have a challenge of McLuhan a little bit later on. McLuhan indeed sets his fastest lap of the race.
Ciancetti looking around the outside there, couldn't quite make it stick, but you can see just how hard he's sliding. It's very rare that you'll see an SR3 sliding around, but it just seemed that Ciancetti's right on the limits of adhesion there for a couple of corners.
Well, I think Ciancetti knows that if he can find a way past Riccardo Dona, Colin Noble is not uncatchably far up the road ahead of him.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things with Estoril is that it's one of those circuits where you really have to plan your overtaking moves 2 or 3 corners ahead. As yes, sure enough, finds a space and leaves Dona really with nowhere to go.
Lovely move from Marco Ciancetti. He had been threatening to do that for a couple of laps, and that was the first time he'd been able to get the toe off Riccardo Dona along the start and finish straight, and it worked out beautifully for him. He's now 5 seconds back from Colin Noble. Here is another look at it. And that really is the textbook slipstream and pass.
Yeah, you can see as Dona started to turn into the entry, he found that his pass was blocked and really had to concede the place very, very early, well before he got to the apex.
There is our race leader, Paddy McLuhan, in super slow motion, and McLuhan gave away half a second to Alex Kapadia last time round. He's already given away 0.7 of a second to Kapadia on this occasion. Here is James Littlejohn in 3rd place, who is not catching the leaders, and I think probably is driving at a pace that is going to secure 3rd place without risking the car. More solid points for them at the start of the season.
Yeah, you just wonder what might have been if you know, you do get the feeling that Wells at the beginning of the race with that bit of contact and the bodywork running possibly unsettled him for a few laps, even if it caused no real lasting damage, and you do wonder what might have been if that hadn't been the case.
Well, here is Kapadia now. This is interesting. He was almost a second quicker than McLuhan last time through. The gap between the leaders is 4.4 seconds, just shy of 9/10 of a second, and Kapadia has got the possibility here of being able to take the victory. Of course, that long safety car period, all 15 minutes of it, means the tyres haven't been worn up as much as they would have been had we not had that interruption. So therefore, Kapadia knows he can ask a little bit of the tyres, but he was only a 10th quicker than McLuhan through the first sector. But it's really this middle sector that is absolutely key. 7 minutes remaining. It's going to come down partly as well to at what point McLuhan crosses the line and goes into the final lap. Find out the middle sector as they head into the chicane at turns 9 and 10. That will give us the indication that we need. It was 4.3 seconds at the end of sector 1. It is 4.228, but it's only a 10th of a second gain from Kapadia, and that isn't anything like enough. It's not to say that either driver isn't pushing very, very hard.
Yeah, and it takes a momentary lapse of concentration to, you know, you don't even have to have a big moment really, just to run wide on one corner, and that's enough of a chance that you know, Kapadia's not going to miss any opportunities on this circuit that he loves so much.
And Kapadia found a lot of the time in the final sector, so it was another half a second that he gained, 3.9 seconds, just shy of 6 minutes remaining. We're going to have time for 3 or 4 more laps. Kapadia winds downhill, 20.4 through sector 1 for McLuhan, a 20.2 through sector 1 for Kapadia. Now, what's very interesting is in the speed trap, Kapadia is consistently 10 kilometres an hour quicker than Paddy McLuhan, which suggests McLuhan is just getting on the brakes a little bit earlier for turn 1.
Yeah, and indeed he's the fastest driver out there, with the exception obviously of retiree Fausti in the RXC Turbo, but yeah, he's obviously found that little bit extra pace, and you know, that might be down to the setup, of course. As very, you know, both him and Alice are pretty experienced, and they just looking at the rear wing angle and just wondering if they may be running a little bit less downforce than the McLuhan car there.
Which is a bold call, but it's one again in a race where you've got the safety car interruption that can pay off, as well, he just trails the brakes a little bit downhill through turns 7 and 8 as they head through sector 2 with identical times in sector 2. Now that is very interesting. Kapadia tries to push on in these late stages. McLuhan seems to have an answer for him. Little John in a very secure third. Colin Noble is in fourth. He leads the Supersport class from Chen Chetty, whose charge has been somewhat stymied. He's a little bit quicker than Noble, but not to the extent he's going to catch Noble between now and the flag.
No, as you say, it does. You do get the sense that he's settled into a rhythm here, that he knows he'll be able to hold on comfortably to third without really pushing the car or the tyres, and take those pit. You know, obviously you'll be carrying less pit stop seconds in the final race as well.
Just 4 minutes remain. Here is our Supersport class leader, Colin Noble. This has been a great performance from Colin. Of course, the inaugural Radical SR1 Cup champion. He's then been racing single-seaters for the past couple of years, coming back into Radical competition, both in the International GT Open and the Radical European Masters, as he embarks on the GT and sports prototype phase of his career.
Yeah, the Noble family no strangers to Radical racing, with his father Colin Noble Senior, a double Radical U domestic champion in the SR3 with the family-run team. So you know, good to see them back in the team, both racing here in the SR3 and also in the new RXC Turbo GT3 in GT Open as well here this weekend.
3.25 minutes remain in the race. Marco Cenchetti second of the Supersport runners. Ricardo Dona is the third. Alan Costa has recovered to sixth place after his spin. But again, looking ahead to the final race, without the burden of a substantial pit handicap, he and Johan Scheer must fancy their chances. The other car that's really faded is Ozzy Yusuf, who has dropped right the way to the back of the field. and that is partly as a result of that stop-and-go penalty, and thereafter possibly not risking the car, wanting to keep it all in one piece for the concluding race of the weekend, where again they'll have the benefit of no success second handicap.
Yeah, so it looks like, I'm just wondering if Capadia's maybe realised that he's going to struggle to get on level terms with McLuhan. That last lap there, really only conceding 6/10 over the lap, and yeah, it looks like if he can keep it on the black stuff, this is McLuhan's for the taking.
He's into the penultimate lap of the race now. Paddy McLuhan, Capadia over 3 seconds adrift, and that is a little bit too much of an ask for him. We might yet see a change for 5th place though, because Alain Costa is closing up onto Marco Cenchetti. Here is our race leader, Paddy McLuhan, racing solo this morning in the car that he shared with James Abbott. Not the car he shared with James Abbott yesterday, the entry he shared with James Abbott yesterday. Changing the car overnight, and Capadia's got him in sight, but he's not quite been able to get onto terms with him. Nonetheless, it's been a valiant chase, and for Alex Capadia and Manhal Alos, a solid weekend in terms of netting those championship points.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Consistency across the season. Just keep notching up the wins and the podiums, and you know, you very quickly find yourself at the head of the table at the end of the season. And as we've so often seen, you know, as McLuhan will know from his experience last year in the Radical Sprint Championship, you know, being the fastest driver out there is one thing, but it's all about the consistency right the way through the season to just keep scoring results and avoid the DNFs. That's what ultimately gets you the title.
Into the final lap for Paddy McLuhan. He leads by 3 seconds. Capadia made no progress last time round, which suggests that he has decided to hold station, settle for second place. And this has been a very impressive performance from Paddy McLuhan. He made a super start to the race, was in the early dicing, but it's really post-pit stops when he's been released into that clear air where he's been able to drive absolutely superbly, running at a very competitive pace. Yes, Capadia has closed up onto his tail, but not to the extent that will have caused McLuhan any particular concern. And now with the clock ticking to 0, McLuhan is about half a lap from the checkered flag.
Yeah, it's particularly impressive considering his relative lack of experience in the SR8. Of course, he's had a few outings in Europe last year with with the Nielsen Racing team in their SR8, but generally speaking, he's previously been confined to the SR3. So you know, this is really a performance that belies his experience.
And he's now just a couple of corners from home. He picks his way uphill through that tight chicane before heading on towards the Parabolica and the final turn. It's been a dramatic second race of the Radical European Masters season, but it is one that is going to reward Paddy McLuhan with victory as he accelerates out of the final turn towards the checker flag, and it's Paddy McLuhan who wins race 2 here in Estoril. Second place goes to Alex Capadia and Manhal Alos, and then we look into the distance for our third place finisher, and that, barring disaster, is going to be James Littlejohn and Tony Wells. Here he comes now, Littlejohn through the Parabolica. Don't think they're going to argue too much with a win and a third place from their opening brace of races for the season as they take the checkered flag. Colin Noble finishes 4th. He and Phil Abbott win the Supersport class from Marco Cenchetti and Marcello Maracchiotto, with Alain Costa and Johan Scheer across the line in 6th position. Ricardo Donat in 7th will complete the Supersport rostrum. So don't forget, we have got our third and final race of the weekend getting underway at 3:40 this afternoon, barring any delays, and therefore we'll be starting our coverage a little bit earlier on at around about 3:30. So make sure that you join Will and I for that one through the usual place on YouTube, as Paddy McLuhan receives the applause of the marshals en route towards Parc Ferme. So it was a slightly disrupted race, that very lengthy safety car period, which served to bunch up the field and that meant that some of the strategies maybe unfolded a little bit differently to how they'd expected to, as we'll have a look at the final results. So, Paddy McGluhan racing solo, he takes the win from Manhalals and Alex Kapadia, then Tony Wells and James Littlejohn completing the rostrum. Phil Abbott and Colin Noble win the Supersport class, ahead of Marcello Maracciotto and Marco Ciancetti, with Riccardo Dona in 7th, completing that podium. Andrea Fausti and Phil Keane, well, they were involved in that incident earlier on, so they got out of their cars. As into Parc Ferme comes our race winner Paddy McGluhan, and that potentially a breakthrough victory for McGluhan in the Radical European Masters, and one that brings him into the championship hunt, as we're still in these early stages of the season, but all the points crucial at this stage of the year. McGluhan rolls down to point under the podium, and then can get out and enjoy the celebrations alongside the Radical Works team. Alex Kapadia gave valiant chase late on, and he and Manhalalos demonstrating great consistency in these already early stages of the championship. McGluhan, thumbs up, number 1 to the camera. Enjoys the handshakes and congratulations of well-wishers in Parc Ferme.
Alex was catching you.
Yes, buddy. Well done. Great race,
So let's take a look back at the highlights then of a dramatic second race of the season for the Radical European Masters. Off the line, it was Tom Ashton who converted pole position, with Andrea Fausti, Tony Wells and Manhalos going 3 wide into turn 1. They all made it through in more or less one piece, as further behind in the Supersport class, Phil Keane and Riccardo Dona were having a great scrap for the Supersport lead, which was decided in favour of Phil Keane. Meanwhile, Andrea Fausti and Johan Scheer were also having a good scrap, and as they fought, Phil Keane was able to close up onto their tail. Scheer eventually able to sneak through at the chicane. This was the moment then on which the race turned. Contact between Fausti and Keane coming on start-finish straight. A huge accident. Both cars absolutely destroyed, but the drivers able to get out of the cockpit. It did mean, though, that we had a 12-minute safety car period. It bunched up the field, it negated the pit handicaps, and therefore gave us a very different-looking second half of the race. It was Paddy McGluhan who emerged in the lead, and his main challenger was Alex Kapadia, who was scything through the pack, eventually to get within 3 seconds. Meanwhile, Alain Costa, who was also in the mix, spun away his chances. And in the Supersport class, had a good scrap between Colin Noble and Riccardo Dona, with Marco Ciancetti moving through into second in the class. So it was victory for Paddy McGluhan, second for Alex Kapadia and Manhalos, third for Tony Wells and James Littlejohn, with Colin Noble and Phil Abbott winning the Supersport class. Well, don't forget to join us later on this afternoon for race 3, but for now from Estoril, it's goodbye from Will Brown and Ben Evans.